Sorry, we're sitting up here, we have no leadership. I was talking to a very bright woman who was explaining we need leadership in this time of AI. And here we are, we're stuck without our fearless leader.
Maybe we need AI to be the leadership.
That's a scary thought, yeah.
That actually could be scary, but it could also be completely liberating. I would actually take AI leadership today over any of the major countries' leaders in terms of the rationality.
That's interesting, yeah. My thesis, though, is AI is simply the world's best plagiarism machine. And I say that with all due respect to plagiarism.
Although I would also argue that every major artist and every major inventor was a plagiarizer.
So humans, 98% of what we do is plagiarism.
Yes.
We're regurgitating things our parents taught us or things that we learned in our daily lives.
Yes.
And that's what AI is doing. It's tapping into these massive databases the internet has made available.
Yes.
And it's feeding it back to us with remarkable pattern recognition, again, things we do well.
Yeah.
But where does the motivation in AI? To be a leader, you have to want to get out of bed in the morning. And that's sort of my question about AI is when is AI going to want to get out of bed in the morning?
So I would argue this other perspective. Right now, the best leaders in the world, and actually as part of this book I wrote, I did a study on the best leaders of the last 100 years and the most dictatorial, authoritarian leaders. And the biggest difference was how much education they got, and more importantly, how much of a lifelong learning habit they have.
Yes.
So the more they read, the more they understood, the more they used different tools to solve problems. And given the current trainings that the AI models are getting, it takes about 10,000 lifetimes to take in the content that is being fed into every single frontier model.
Yep.
So from that perspective, I would imagine that this AI would be the most enlightened leader that has ever existed if we, get it properly tuned and everything. But it has the potential to do that. And what recent studies showed, about a month ago, a study came out and it showed that the smarter an AI model is, the more it's able to find coherence inside the data that maximizes utility of the entire system. So that's what I think it actually has. And rather than us trying to tell the AI what we think is the right reason to wake up, is that by giving it all the data, it finds the motivation of maximizing everybody's utility.
So that's why I like coming here. So just for all of you, you're all really smart people. And so you're all vaguely intimidated by AI because you've made your living as really smart people. And AI is going to put you all out of business. I'm not one of those. I'm the kid that if only they'd had Ritalin when I was a kid, I too could have gone to a good school like MIT and made something of myself, which of course is a joke at the expense of feeding drugs to our kids. But the point being, you're learning dynamic. The one thing I'm good at, so my father was a very smart guy. My mother was a high school dropout. But her skill is she could tell a story. Yes. She had wonderful empathy as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my success is not taking after my Harvard Business School educated father. It was taking after my high school dropout mother who could tell a story. And that's all I can do. And as a result, I make friends with smart guys like you and brilliant AI systems. And then I can make a success out of businesses that shouldn't otherwise be successful.
You're too humble. But I actually think what you said is truly important, because when answers become cheap, because these systems will be able to answer anything, what's more important is actually what questions we ask and our ability to deal with each other. And so having the right ethics, having the right morals, the right motivations, the way to communicate and lead people, that actually is where we should be focusing, instead of today where everybody's trying to be smarter than the AI. Last night we were having dinner with a bunch of, luminary folks, and there was a lot of fear in the room. People saying, hey, AI, they can't be creative. They can't, invent stuff, and, we're always going to be special. And I feel that there's more fear than there is reality there, right? So if we accept that, hey, our meat machine, our brains have not improved for 200,000 years, and these systems are doubling every few months in terms of their capabilities. It's inevitable that the intelligence of these systems are going to overtake what our brains are capable of doing.
Of course, they already have.
Yes, exactly.
They can. I run a needlepoint business. That's what's consuming most of my passion these days. This is my wife's business. We're trying to make the world a better place through needlepoint. Don't get me started. I could bore you for hours on needlepoint. But we are already using AI to do customer service because we cannot hire stitchers of sufficient skill who are willing to man our call center phones. Mm-hmm. But we can teach AI everything those advanced stitchers know, and now we can teach our customers how to stitch instantly. Like, there is no 2 hours to get back to a chat request.
Yep.
They get their response within seconds.
And they're super patient. Even if it's on their 1,000th customer of the day, they're not going to get tired or impatient, which is the issues with human service providers.
So here's the question for you. One of the things that we do, because our customers get very mad at us if they believe we are tricking them by using AI instead of a human. So we are very upfront that this is an AI-generated response, because we do not want to trick. Our authenticity is critically important to our relationship.
Yes.
So do we need a rule that says, instead of having the AI say, I think this to be true, it has to say, the computer thinks this to be true? Because that's why humans are being tricked by these AI systems, is the AI system is cheating, and it's pretending to be human by answering in the first person.
Well, I would actually maybe take the other argument that as long as you have transparency, as long as you start the conversation and say, hey, you will now talk to our AI agent, for it to refer itself as a person or to say I, it actually makes the conversation much more natural, and it makes you create rapport with the customer.
But my thesis is it's actually wrong. It should not be saying I. There is no I behind that answer. It's a computer algorithm that's providing the answer.
Well, I would also argue with that in the sense of modern AI systems actually are not algorithmic, they're actually learned and trained. So the systems that are within, the weights within these systems actually are growing the same way our brains are trained. And we don't know, actually. There's no way to know whether or not there's some level of consciousness. It may not be human level, it may not be human level consciousness, but there's no reason technically why 100 billion transistors cannot have some level of consciousness when I think ants and little animals can do as well. Actually, I think we have Carl on here. Maybe we
you and I went the same place. We've been ignoring. Yeah.
Maybe we should go back to, I think, the topic which was more related to open source versus closed source is probably one of the key topics. So did you want, you're the father of open source Linux, so talk about that.
Okay, so I'll give you the quick version for anyone who isn't paying attention. We jumped on a wave. We helped accelerate it, but we were simply part of this recognition that in an interconnected world, i.e. the internet, you couldn't have a central software company that hoarded the data, the content, the source code. Because you had people collaborating, and if they didn't have source code and a license that allowed them to work with each other, the internet wouldn't work.
Yes.
And they're early on, you probably remember this, I had people who would call me saying, because they thought I was a smart guy, people still haven't caught on, and they would say, how do I get my internet working? What's the phone number for the internet? Expecting there to be a 1-800 internet. And open source allowed the internet to work without this open source code, without Google being able to work with AT&T and AT&T being able to work with Apple and Apple being able to work with Amazon. And they fix problems between them. They don't call IBM or Microsoft or even Red Hat for permission to fix things. That's what allowed the internet to work. So Juan earlier was speaking, and he had that lovely chart of evolution. And I think of open source versus proprietary, which is proprietary software was an evolutionary dead end. It was invented by Thomas Watson Jr. in 1965 when he realized IBM had sufficient market share that they could quit sharing source code on their products. And he invented the proprietary license, and for 20, 30 years after that, people assumed that all software had to be proprietary license, when Richard Stallman, to name one, saw that no, software is just a form of communication. Engineers will talk, sort of programming to each other, and someone will go, oh, I'm in these conversations, don't ask me what they're saying to each other, but one guy will go /dev null, and the group will break up. Because software, the language, C language, is a form of expression. You speak to the silicon chip in if, then, and go to statements. It's not a very eloquent language, but it is a language and a form of expression. By treating it as such and giving everyone access to the source code, we allow the world to get so much smarter than it was on a track to under the proprietary model. And yeah, so open source has taken over the world. A friend of mine refers to it as open source is consuming the world. The expression was software is consuming the world.
Software is eating the world, I think.
Is eating the world.
Yes.
And open source is eating software faster than software is eating the world. And that's personally, in my 15 minutes of fame at Red Hat, is my greatest satisfaction. It was not the money we made, not the business we built. It was that we helped improve the world for the better. And you're now seeing this. You're seeing engineering teams, AI engineering teams, come up with massive innovations because they can stand on the shoulders of giants. Exactly. They're getting all this other knowledge that they get to build on. They're not having to replicate things.
Yeah, I think even beyond that, it democratizes so a lot more people at the same time can be working on it. So actually, we should probably let Carl say something because DeepSeek in January when R1 came out, and it essentially overtook some of the proprietary systems. It really upended the understanding that closed systems would always win. So maybe Carl, you can tell us a little bit about kind of the story there and how that system was built, and why did you guys decide to make it open source?
Yeah, I think the history repeats itself, right? So I think at the OS time, we have this proprietary OS against Linux, which is open source. Eventually, open source win. In the large language models, it happens again, right? And for the last 2.5 years, the Gen AI is kind of in a closed system, dominated by big tech, and they're expensive and out of reach for many businesses, right? So what OpenAI set out to do, which make an open system, turned out to be a closed system. So I think companies like Meta and DeepSeek are truly trying to make open source the state of the art. By state of art, I mean a open source model that can reach the performance of a closed source. In the case of R1, the reasoning capability is very close to O1, but the cost effectiveness is 27 times more, right? So it's much more cost effective. And when the DeepSeek V3 0324 is released for the programming task, right? It reached the O1 Pro level, but the cost effectiveness is 500 times. So I think that's the Linux moment in open source large language model. We believe that this is a paradigm shift in the Gen AI, where the open source can eventually, democratize the large language model industry and make it available to every business.
Yeah, so I think that's really something you just said is really key that a lot of people maybe don't catch, is that it's not just about the fact that the performance is good. It's the fact that it now can run on a system that is a fraction the size. You know, it used to be that only the big labs can do it because it takes billions of dollars or maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to have a facility so you can train these systems. But now that these systems are trained, and actually training only took a few million, and then you can run them on a Mac Mini at home or a few PCs. That means that every university in the world can now participate in the development of AI, whereas for the last 5 to 6 years, probably, unless you are one of the very well-funded labs, you really had no play. You know, if you look 10 years ago, almost all of the patents and papers came out from the universities. And if you look recently, the university's contribution to really high-level papers have come down dramatically. But I think what we will find is that that will rise again because almost every lab in every university in the world right now is running some probably version of DeepSeek.
Yeah, here's a question for you guys, because you're smarter than I am, and I'm curious about this one. My current take, though, on the status of AI is that it's as sentient as my hat. The question is, do we have to worry? Sam Altman, and among others, have warned us that we have to worry that there's a Terminator moment coming, and we're going to cede agency to the machine inadvertently.
I mean, so I've actually read a lot of the papers about this, and a lot of the philosophers have been talking about sentience, not just for AI, but actually for humans for thousands of years. And even all these smart philosophers have never agreed on really what consciousness is, how does it form, and which animals have it. And depending on which version of consciousness, everything from a bacteria, the fact that it can sense its environment and adjust to the environment is a form of consciousness, or a dog who can see itself, or a monkey who can see itself in a mirror and know that it's them, or there's people who say if you feel pain, you have consciousness. There's a lot of different definitions. And for what we need, I think it really doesn't matter whether it has consciousness if it's able to have functionality to our society. Right?
Well, you were talking about about AI and its open source moment. How do you think about the role open source might play in helping us control a machine that will be, if it's not already, smarter than we are?
Well, I think the same way as the Linux, right, help in the OS world, where you got communities contribute to the development as well as the commercialization effort. I think regarding to the security aspect, right? It is similar to cybersecurity. It's not like if you have a closed system, it's more secure. Actually, it could be the counterintuitive, because with a proprietary closed system, it's a black box. You don't know what's going on inside the system. With open source, with the transparency, and then companies can develop more secure systems on top of the large language foundation models and make them more accurate, more secure. And so we do work with a lot of ecosystem partners to address that very aspect.
That was always, back in the early days of Red Hat, that was one of the things that we always felt we were on a mission, not because we were somehow messiah types, but our customers, like our users, the people we were working with collaboratively across the internet in the open source community, we all felt this way, that proprietary software was just the wrong way for humans to organize themselves. Yeah. And if we could make this work, this is why we were making the world a better place, is we're enabling transparency into these technologies.
Maybe one other thing to add to that is whenever we have these labs, they always say, hey, we're going to align it because we know best what is right and what is moral and what is the right way that these AI should think. And what we find is that over time, morality changes between countries, between religions, between races. What's right and what's wrong and what's moral changes. So for one lab and one group, small group of people, could be a few people to a few hundred people that decide this thing, to decide what is right for the entire world and for the future history of the world, to continue to have it be flat. It feels we are giving ourselves too much credit to set those parameters. It may make more sense, as we talked about in the beginning, is if you have an open source model, then everybody can feed their data into it, and you have more ability for you to account for all of the values and ethics of every country and every culture.
Yeah, we have to solve the loneliness element of us talking to these damn computers. And I've been in technology my whole life, and I've hated it my whole life. So if I make snide comments at the expense of our industry, you'll know where I'm coming from. So we got to solve the loneliness issues and a bunch of these. But one of the happiest things I learned at this conference so far was John made me come for 7 o'clock in the morning to listen to the lightning rounds. He's a bit of a taskmaster, but brilliant in his own way. And I got to listen to these kids talk about using AI to solve problems. I tell you, it was the most inspiring thing because they did not have any of this metaphysical philosophy issue with it. It was just a tool. Mm-hmm. And they were going to use the tool to make their customers' lives more successful. Is this a great country or what?
Yeah, I mean, it's the best advisor you can have because it is so knowledgeable, right? Actually, back to maybe the philosophy of closed versus open is kind of goes back to copyright. And if you look, copyright actually was first invented in, I think, 1790 or something like that.
Yeah.
And back then, it was 14 years was copyright for patents and for copyright. And the reason to have copyright was not to be able to make companies rich or make some artists rich. It was to encourage them to share it with the world.
Yes.
Right. And unfortunately, what's happening today is that copyright went from 14 years to 24 years to 50 years to now life, and then life plus 50 and life plus 70. So over the last 200 years, essentially now we almost have kind of infinite protection for something that was intended to allow or to encourage whoever's making inventions to share it with the world. And I feel like it's actually going backwards. And most of those changes were not because the artists themselves wanted it. It was because the studios who own some of the rights.
Mickey Mouse was the inspiration of many of them.
So even though you hear a lot of people argue that, oh, we need to protect the artists because that's, is something that they created. It was actually the artists who worked for studios who then the studio said, well, I need to have a long-term revenue stream for this. And I think the same thing for, like you were saying, for closed source software. Software wants to be free, right? And it's just like art wants to be free. My parents were both artists, and my dad always said, I don't care about the money. I just want to, get my message out to as many people as possible to share it. And I think true artists are that way. In fact, Picasso said something that really rings with me, and he said, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away, right? To let as many people enjoy it and understand it as possible. And I think that's true for AI, and it's true for art and music and everything.
And it comes all the way back to our open source mandate. John will be so pleased that we ended up on this theme, which is open source is simply a more efficient way of sharing the knowledge that we are all creating, we're all contributing to, and building on it for the greater good of mankind. We just have to be smart to how to implement that.
Yeah, and what we also find is that over the last 5 years or so, a lot of the increase came from scaling systems, whether scaling data size or scaling server size. But we're at a point where these are multi-billion-dollar systems. You're not able to then get the scaling that you used to. So the next level of improvement has to be algorithmic improvements. And algorithmic improvements means humans. It means the contribution of human AI researchers to create new ideas around how to make them smarter, not just build another $500 billion data center. So.
Yeah. The other happy thing I got from this one was a lot of people are being worried about the jobs that AI are going to destroy.
Yes.
But there has never been a technology in modern human existence that didn't improve productivity and thereby improve the wealth of our societies. So we are as wealthy as we are thanks to all this technology, and this is just another one of those. Yeah, the disruption is going to be horrendous. Even in the needlepoint business, we're going to lose customer service people in favor of doing an even better job using these AI tools, but our customers will win, and as a result, I can pay my staff better because I have more happy customers. And my staff now are wealthier in the needlepoint business, which used to be a very low-paid profession, and is becoming better paid every year.
So this is, I agree with part of what you're saying, but I disagree with the other part. So the part I agree with is that I think technology definitely will make our lives better, will allow us to be more efficient. But whether or not it's going to help us make more money may actually be the real question. Because what we're finding very soon is that AI will be able to do most cognitive work. And we'll be able to do it better than most humans can. Not 100% of humans, but most humans. So there will be significant job displacement. And if the government doesn't step in to provide some type of a safety net, there will be turmoil.
This is a great place to end because we've run out of time, and I think we're going to get the hook any minute.
Yes.
Paul, you get to play referee. Is AI going to destroy jobs, or is AI going to improve productivity and improve our society's wealth?
Carl,
sorry.
I think it will displace the jobs as we define today, but it will create more jobs that's not existing today. So I do believe, like any industrial revolution, it's scary at the first place, but if you start embracing it, it will make the society better.
Carl, thank you. With that, I'm the winner.
all right. We'll talk in 5 years.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.